Question number 3 asks, one or more external forces are exerted on each object enclosed in a dashed box shown in the figure below. Identify the reaction to each of these forces. Assume that A, B, and C occur on Earth, while D, E, and F occur far from any outside gravitational influences. Select all that apply. Alright, so what we have first is a picture of, and actually I'm going to go ahead and add the picture right here. Okay, so the first picture is right here, and it's a guy pulling on a spring, and the answer says to identify all of the forces that this thing is acting on. So what is this spring acting on? So it's pulling the hand back. The hand's pulling to the right, so it's pulling the hand back the other way. It's also pulling the wall this way, and you can imagine that it's got some kind of mass, so it's got a gravitational force on the Earth to pull it up. And so those are the three forces, and actually that would be the answer. So it has an upward force on the Earth, a rightward force on the wall, and a leftward force on the hand. Okay, the next one is this little wagon, and so it's trying to isolate the wagon from the handle, I believe, and that's how I went about answering the question. But it's pulling this way on the handle. The handle's pulling this way, and so it's the reaction force is to pull it back that way. And so it's pulling that way. Now, if you can imagine, if you step on a scale, it puts a downward force on the scale and causes the needle to move or the numbers to show up if you have a digital one, whatever the case may be. So you can imagine that even though this is on Earth, it still has a downward force on the Earth from contact. It's got a contact force on the Earth. Now, it also has, so it has a down and leftward force on the handle. So I said a leftward, but it's down and left, because this is going up at an angle, so it's actually going down back at the other angle. So you got the down and leftward force on the handle. You've got a downward force on the Earth due to contact, and you have this thing also has a mass, and anything that has a mass creates gravity, so it also has an upward force on the Earth due to gravity. And so it's got the force of its own gravity, so it would be it wouldn't be little g, because little g usually means the Earth, but it would have an upward force of its own gravity. The Earth has its gravity pulling the other way, so these are not these would be action-reaction. And it also has a normal force from sitting on the Earth, and the Earth has a normal force pushing back at it. But since we are not asking about the forces on the Earth, I'm just trying to pair them up so you can see action-reaction. It's not asking about the force on the Earth, which is asking that what forces the wagon exerts. So it exerts a downward force on the Earth from contact, upward from gravity, down and to the left on the handle. Now we got the next one is the football kicker, and we're focusing in on the football. So what force is it having? Well, if the foot is kicking it that way, it's going to have a downward and to the right force on the foot. And so we're not isolating the foot from the player, so we're just going to say it's got a downward to the right on the player. Now, since it also has a mass, it's pulling upward on the Earth with its own special gravitational power that's so minuscule that a fly wouldn't care, but it exists. Those are the only direct forces that it has. So anyhow, that's the direct forces. The indirect forces would be if it's pushing down to the right on the player, then the player is touching the ground, so it's indirectly with the ground, but it didn't ask for indirect, it just asked for direct forces, and so that's the only two, is downward to the right on the player, upward on the Earth due to its own personal gravity. So I think these next ones are easier because we're assuming that they're away from everything and that no gravity is being exerted on them. And so what we have here are force fields. So you might think of it as, for example, this one's representing, I believe, mass, two different masses of objects. And so these masses would have their own gravity. So this particular mass is exerting a gravitational pull on this one to go this way. And so it would produce its own slightly smaller force of its gravity pulling to the left. So it's exerting a force on M to the left. Then this is like an electrical force field. So this is the positive, and this is the little q is the negative. And so if big Q is pulling little q to the right, then little q is also pulling big Q to the left. So it's pulling big Q to the left. And then we have magnetic force field. So the magnet is pulling the iron to the right. So the iron is also exerting a force back through the magnetic field to the left. And so the thing to remember whenever you're looking at action-reaction is in reaction-reaction, the force is always equal force, but it always acts on a different object. So if we were to say that, this was being pulled to the left instead of this, then we would be wrong, because if this is exerting the rightward force on little q, then the reaction has to be on big Q, because big Q is the only thing around. It has to be an action on a different object than the first object. So that kind of sums it up. I hope it was easy to understand. If you have any questions, post it in the comments at the bottom of the page.